Heya Cryptozens, welcome back to the Crypto Overnighter. My name is Nikodemus and we do crypto news analysis nightly at 10 p.m. And keep in mind, none of this should be considered financial advice. Sunday, February 5th, 2023. So how was your Sunday? Mine was sleepy. Very sleepy Sunday. And the news pretty much went to sleep today too. But we found a few things to talk about. Like SBF. Because Sam Bankman-Fried is always good for something to talk about lately. For example, the subject of donations. Now, everybody knows that Sam donated heavily during last year's midterm elections. And not just Sam. Other luminaries at the FTX exchange were also quite generous towards political candidates. And I've known this day would come. I said it here on this show. They can go after those donations. Remember right when this whole thing came out? Then someone started connecting the dots and then made a stink about political donations. That if the allegations were true, Sam is a thief, along with everybody with him, and that means that those donations were made with stolen money. So in some cases, the politicians said they returned the donation or they refused it in the beginning, whatever. But some politicians, Senator Gillibrand, for example, they donated that money to charity. The senator donated to a Bronx-based nonprofit that offers free financial counseling. Now, I know Debbie Stabenow also got SBF money. Senator Stabenow also indicated that she would donate that money to charity. It was her bill, by the way, that Sam was backing that would have empowered the CFTC to regulate crypto. So I don't know if she gave that money to charity or not, but I know she was planning on it. Well, unfortunately for them, none of that matters. It doesn't matter if you donate that money to charity. If you get $10,000 of stolen cash, you've gotten $10,000 of stolen cash, and you're expected to be able to produce it on demand. The fact that you donated $10,000 to some charity or another is utterly irrelevant. The victim of the theft needs to be made whole. It's called a clawback, and that's what's going on here. FTX is giving those politicians until the end of the month to give that money back. And actually, it's not all that unusual. Clawbacks happen in bankruptcies. That's just how it goes. What's remarkable in this case is the targets of those clawbacks. So what's going on here is John J. Ray III and the new FTX leadership, they're giving people who received political donations made by Sam or other FTX, they're giving them until the end of the month, February 28th, to return that money. And so this is meant to get the funds back in the hands of the exchange's creditors. And they've been making steady progress on that front. But I'm not getting my hopes up that victims will see 100% compensation. But progress is being made. Andy Dieterich is an attorney for FTX, and he said that they have recovered some $5 billion in cash and crypto assets. That was as of January 11th. Unfortunately, that $5 billion falls short in comparison to the almost $9 billion owed. In a statement, FTX said, quote, FTX debtors are sending confidential messages to political figures, political action funds, and other recipients of contributions or other payments that were made by or at the direction of FTX debtors, Samuel Bankman-Fried, or other officers or principals of the FTX debtors, collectively the FTX contributors. These receipts are requested to return such funds to the FTX debtors by February 28, 2023. So there you go. They're giving the various senators and representatives, councilmen, aldermen, whatever. If you got political donations from SBF and company, you've got until the end of the month to pay that back. And man, there has got to be a lot of them out there. According to court documents, FTX executives, including Sam, spent $93 million on political donations between March of 2020 and November 2022. We've talked about this before. Back on December 19th, FTX set up a way for politicians and whoever to return donated funds. Well, that was then. You could just return the money, no problem. Not so much anymore, at least after February 28th. Now they're going to want interest. They said, quote, to the extent such payments are not returned voluntarily, the FTX debtors reserve the right to commence actions before the bankruptcy court to require the return of such payments, with interest accruing from the date any action is commenced. Now, some political groups are already ahead of this one. We talked about it a while back. The Democratic National Committee, as well as their campaign committees for the House and the Senate, they said in December that they were setting aside more than $1 million to pay back FTX and that they would return the money at the direction of the bankruptcy lawyers. And then others like Representative Kevin Hern from Oklahoma. He got $5,000 from Ryan Salame. Now, he donated that to a charity called Food on the Move. Well, he's still likely going to be on the hook for that $5,000 to return back to FTX. But that's nothing compared to the $4.6 billion FTX is expecting to recover through the sale of various non-strategic assets like LedgerX and FTX Japan. Now, staying with the bankruptcy case here, we'll get to the criminal case in a minute. But we do know that Emergent Fidelity Technologies filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Their filing with the District of Delaware indicates that they want their case handled in tandem with FTX's bankruptcy. Emergent Fidelity Technologies is a holding company based in Antigua and Barbuda, and according to court documents, they submitted a voluntary petition for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. And you've heard this name before on the show. Emergent is the holding company that has those 55 million shares of Robinhood. Now, back in November, BlockFi sued them for those shares. BlockFi said that those shares were pledged to them as collateral. Well, those shares are in the middle of a three-way struggle between FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, and FTX creditor Jonathan Ben-Shimon. Well, on January 6th, the DOJ seized the company's assets, those Robinhood shares and about $20 million. Angela Barkhouse is one of the joint provisional liquidators on the case. She's the source of the information that Emergent filed in Delaware specifically so they could file for a, quote, form of joint administration with FTX's bankruptcy case. She said, quote, the joint provisional liquidator's duties are to the debtor's creditors, whoever those creditors may be. Given the many parties claiming to be creditors or outright owners of the Robinhood shares in proceedings in the U.S., the JPLs believe that Chapter 11 protection is the only practical way to empower the debtor to defend itself, the assets, and its creditors' interests in the U.S. Now, according to Barkhouse, SBF and Gary Wang split ownership of Emergent 90-10, with 90% going to Sam. Okay, so we know Sam's not above doing some shady stuff. We also know that Emergent only had two assets, those Robinhood shares and some cash. So why are they filing bankruptcy? What debts could they reasonably have accrued with just those two assets that they couldn't pay off with $20 million in cash? Seems like that's a reasonable question. Anyway, that's Emergent. Now, we recently talked about Sam's brother, Gabe. Now, he has a nonprofit that he founded called Guarding Against Pandemics. And that nonprofit owns a house. A townhouse a few blocks away from the U.S. Capitol. This house was recently taken off the market. And it was taken off the market because it was purchased with dirty money. Allegedly dirty money. So, according to court filings, FTX is saying that those $3.3 million used to purchase the three-story, 4,100 square foot building, those funds were stolen. Of course, the media started nosing around that story with the listing company before Guarding Against Pandemics pulled it. Now, a spokesperson for the nonprofit said Gabriel is no longer part of the charity. According to property records, the nonprofit did try to sell it for the same $3.3 million they bought it for back in April. Now, as far as the criminal case goes, I'm waiting for the unveiling, because the two people who helped Sam get out on his $250 million bail could see their identities released soon, next month anyway. According to a recent ruling by Judge Lewis Kaplan, they're going forward with the petition from these media outlets. Now, Judge Kaplan said that the names would be released, quote, for the limited purpose of asserting the public's claimed right of access. Now, keep in mind, this is a could be. There's no guarantees here. In fact, he didn't even seem convinced there was much to sway his opinion either way. Sam's attorneys have until February 7th to contest the judge's ruling. Acknowledging the likelihood of an appeal, the judge wrote, if a notice of appeal from this order is filed by then he's going to extend the deadline to Valentine's Day. That would give Sam's lawyers time to file for a more permanent stay. This comes as the result of a January 12th letter sent by Bloomberg, the Financial Times, Reuters, and 5 other media firms. They said, quote, the public's right to know Sam Bankman-Fried's guarantors outweighed their privacy and safety rights. Now, as we covered before when this topic came up, Sam's team is saying considerations of safety demand that those identities be kept secret. Remember the guys who crashed the gate outside Sam's house? Well, his parents' house? Well, there you go. However, securities guards on the scene said that they were not able to get the license number. Now, personally, I would be asking where's the security footage of the incident, but that's just me. Judge Kaplan said that he didn't necessarily doubt that the threats happened, but he hadn't seen evidence that it has either. He did say, quote, "But it does not follow that the non-parental sureties would face similar threats and harassment." And he was talking about the difference in the relationship between Sam and his parents versus Sam and his guarantors. Now, in addition to being his parents, Sam's father worked at FTX for a year, so there is that. Kaplan said, quote, "Thus, the defendant's claim that the non-parental sureties would face similar intrusions is speculative and only entitled to modest weight." And speaking of bankrupt companies, we have some movement on the Genesis bankruptcy. A creditors committee has been appointed. It's a 7-member team, and they're supposed to represent the interests of unsecured creditors in the Genesis global bankruptcy case. So they'll be there in the bankruptcy trial, representing the creditors, as well as being consulted before any big decisions are made, as well as participating in the reorg plan. Now, typically, members are chosen from a list of 20 unsecured creditors. This time around, it's Marana Asset Management, SOF International, Digital Finance Group, Bitvavo, and 3 individuals. It was William Harrington from the U.S. Trustee's Office that made those selections. The Trustee's Office, they're a group in the Justice Department. They're responsible for monitoring bankruptcy cases. With over $290 million in exposure, crypto exchange Bitvavo is Genesis Global's largest creditor. Second place is Marana with $150 million, and $37 million is good enough to see third place for Digital Finance Group. Genesis Capital, made up of Genesis Global Holdings, Genesis Global Capital, and Genesis Asia Pacific, filed for bankruptcy on January 9th, claiming up to $10 billion in liabilities. The Chapter 11 filing came after 2 months of liquidity issues, and those issues can be traced back to Sam and FTX. That led to the November 16th shutdown of customer withdrawals. On January 24th, a different suit saw various creditors file a class action against Genesis and their parent company, Digital Currency Group, and the CEO, Barry Silbert. They alleged violations of securities laws. They're saying that Genesis intentionally misrepresented its financial health, that the securities fraud comes from the allegedly false and misleading statements. So these guys are considering Genesis's actions to be in violation of U.S. Securities Exchange Act Section 10B. Now, after all that Genesis and FTX talk, let's end things on a more positive note. Visa is looking at a plan to let their customers convert digital assets to fiat currency, which, if Visa decides to become a crypto off-ramp in that way, that could be really good. This information comes to us from Coy Sheffield. He's Visa's head of crypto. He was at Starkware Sessions 2023 when he said, quote, "We've been testing how to actually accept settlement payments from issuers in USDC starting on Ethereum and paying out in USDC on Ethereum. So these are large value settlement payments." Now, according to Sheffield, global settlements with digital currencies and fiat currencies is something they're investing in over at Visa. He said, quote, "That's been one of the areas we want to build muscle memory. The same way that we can convert between dollars and euros on a cross-border transaction, we should be able to convert between digital tokenized dollars and traditional dollars." Which, sure, if we can get a good, safe, secure, cheap way to do that, that's going to be very important for the future of cryptocurrencies on a global scale. And they're looking at this from the global perspective. Their current plan is to use blockchain to settle accounts across its network faster. That said, the payments would still be taking place on SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. The TLDR on SWIFT is that it's a non-profit cooperative group set up by European bankers as a way of moving transaction communication between the banks. Which, between you and me, I would just cut SWIFT out of the equation. SWIFT is going to be the slowdown between the two systems, and Sheffield agrees with that sentiment. He said, quote, we set all over Swift. So we can't move money as frequently as we'd like because there are a number of limitations that exist in those networks. And so we've been experimenting, we publicly announced. We've been testing how to actually accept settlement payments with stablecoins. And that's going to do it for us tonight. I want to thank you, my listeners, because when you stop listening, I will stop talking. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, follow, subscribe. Maybe leave a review or a rating. In the meantime, we'll see you tomorrow night.